Morning, everybody. Greg Nelson here from the Digital Media Institute. We come to you every Tuesday, typically speaking, when we're talking about animation and visual effects. We're talking about, we're talking about, we've been going through a series of, sorry guys, I was just checking something. We've been going through a series looking at the best animation and visual effects, particularly speaking the visual effects award winners and nominees for the Academy. And that's been a lot of fun. Actually, we've gone through Alien Romulus, we've gone through A Better Man, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. We ended last week on Dune. So if you really want to kind of check out what we've been talking about, please go back through our channel and see. We've got a whole playlist of those things. Today, this week, what we're going to be talking about is flow. And flow has been really kind of a groundbreaking thing from the standpoint of it being done on Blender. And this is Blender's big win. It's the first time that this free software has it's ever won Best Feature Film. And, you know, you really look at it from the standpoint of it went up against the big guys. It went up against Pixar, and it won. And, you know, was it necessarily the best film? I don't know. That is really not for me to say. But they had a phenomenal story to tell as a filmmaking team. And so let's just watch a little bit behind the scenes here, and we'll get there with that.
Flow is actually the first film I've made with a team. Before I made films basically myself. I didn't limit myself this time, setting it around things that are easy to animate. We have a lot of animals, we have a lot of water, which is in animation one of the hardest things to do. So we did have people who are much better at everything than me, but I needed to understand the basics so I could communicate these ideas.
The thing that he said that I genuinely appreciate is the fact that he's self-taught. Okay, that's actually a really cool thing, and there are positives and negatives to that. Myself, I'm self-taught as well. I've been doing this for a long time, and one thing being self-taught, you're going to learn through experience, and you're going to learn through a lot of mistakes. But at the same time, you genuinely learn what works, and you genuinely learn how to communicate what you're saying to another team of people. And so he did something really smart. He brought in people that were actually really good animators and was able to communicate that.
And even though I had the script, I still would kind of improvise a lot. I see it as one big thing that I do all at the same time. I need that process of discovery so I can try different things. I would just create these sets in 3D and take a virtual camera and almost like a live action location scout. And I discover ideas and I can place the camera, but I can still adjust the set. So I do that instead of drawing storyboards.
All right, so I want to comment on that specifically because to my students, former, present, this should be of huge encouragement to you because this guy is a one-man band. He is essentially the Robert Rodriguez of digital animation filmmaking. And there's an absolute reason why that he's been able to make this work. And why you as filmmakers also, people that are just one person with a laptop, you know, and an Unreal Engine and Blender, why you should be able to look at this and be super encouraged because he's doing something that is hard, but is also within the realm of anybody now. You know, it used to be if you were going to try and make, you know, let's go and talk Pixar for a second. You know, that was huge render farms. That was huge, you know, approval processes. That was a huge amount of time that was necessary, very specifically just to get something done. Now we're living in a world where it's like, hey, I'm just going to go throw together a couple of sets and I'm going to start blocking in some camera moves, and I'm going to start just seeing if I can make these things interesting and start to set up my visuals. And then once I got that working, I'm going to turn this back over to animators that actually know what they're doing, and we're going to get that part of it right. And that's very, very intriguing to me personally as a filmmaker myself and as a teacher who wants to set students off on the right direction. This is something that you should seriously be looking at from your own perspective.
CG animation gives me very complicated camera moves, which would be impossible to like do in live action. Having these long takes creates that sense of real time, that you're experiencing the story with the characters. And all the films I've also done have no dialogue, so I'm kind of really attracted to telling stories visually and also using sounds and music in ways that can only be achieved in cinema. It was
done with no dialogue, honestly. I was watching it the other day, and I was really looking at it going, wow, they're doing this thing and nobody says anything. And basically what you get is you're asked to join a ride with animals that are escaping a flood, and they just happen to all make their way onto a boat, and this is the journey that we're on. And what you're seeing is actually really intriguing performances that are based in real animal movements, and what that may or may not be like. Yeah, it's a fantasy, but it's interesting.
in cinema. It was almost like a casting process where I was looking at different animals and considering how they might interact. It was important that they are distinct both visually in terms of the silhouette and but also in terms of the voices. But I didn't want any of them to be antagonists. I wanted each of them to be relatable. All of these characters were kind of chosen thinking about that theme, which is kind of looking for a group where you belong.
Now, here we'll just go back to a couple shots. Okay, so this is, I had to keep reminding myself as I was watching this movie that this is not a Pixar movie, okay? And when I say that, you have to look at some of the things that are compromises that had to be made just to get this thing to render correctly. If you look at, let's specifically look at the cat, right? If this were a Pixar movie, this cat would be covered in beautiful looking fur. They'd have all the lighting done beautifully and that sort of thing. Because we're doing this essentially on a laptop, right? Compromises need to be made to deal with the lack of, the fur would be taking forever to render. So they opted essentially for like a smoother sort of texture.
Antagonists. I wanted each of them to be.
So if we look specifically at this shot right here, okay, so you can kind of see very specifically how smoothed off and even gradiated, like right here in the ears, you can see, and right here in some spots. That was done specifically just for rendering. Now, like I said, I had to keep reminding myself that this is not a Pixar movie. And, and once I was able to get beyond that and suspend that disbelief, because, I tell my class all the time, one of the things that you really run into here is all I see when I watch movies, when I see animations, when I watch visual effects films, all I see is points and polygons. That's literally all I see. That is a kind of the problem that I personally run into being an artist for so long. But once you were able to get beyond that and start to just look at the performances, these really work well on camera. Now, again, I don't love it. I mean, like, I don't love looking at these textures because they just don't. I don't love them, but that's okay. As a filmmaker myself, and I can look at that and go, you know what? I totally understand why he did it. And who am I to criticize? Honestly, I mean, he won an Oscar, not me. So I genuinely respect the choice because he chose to get it done. And if he was going full fur, we'd still be waiting for this movie to come out. So, bravo to doing it. Visually, I winced just a little bit, but that's just me. That's not, not everybody else.
And
So.
thinking about that theme, which is kind of looking for a group where you belong. We used real animal voices. It's not humans mimicking animals. The only animal where we did take some artistic liberties is the capybara, because the voice was so high-pitched, kind of unpleasant. And this character is very calm and kind of peaceful, and we needed something deeper. So the capybara is voiced by a baby camel. Because there's no dialogue, we have to use their body language, their behavior to kind of express these things. And in terms of the movements, all credit goes to our animators. Our approach I would describe as naturalism rather than realism. So we are studying real life. Everything is really animated by hand. So it's all these artists who studied animals and interpreted their movement. My approach was to have
Here a little bit is just simply the fact that again, it's possible to do this, but when you start to look back on other movies that have been done, like let's talk The Lion King. One of my favorites is actually what's the name of the DreamWorks movie about the horse, and I'm just completely blanking on it, but I remember the story. I had a buddy that worked at DreamWorks at the time when they were making The Stallion of the Scimitar. I can't remember the name of the movie, but it doesn't matter. Where DreamWorks is in Burbank is right down the street from the LA Equestrian Center. And so they had a horse down at the Equestrian Center, which is like a mile away, and they would just trailer them up they would take the animators down to the Equestrian Center, and they would literally just sit there and they would watch this horse prance around and do its thing, and they were studying him, and they were really getting it working correctly. Spirit, thank you. I got a comment from one of my students. Spirit, which was a great movie actually, and it studying its movements was really what made it real, and you can see that was what was done in this film as well. They really studied it well.
somewhat more detail in the environments in the background, so you have that immersive feeling. But the characters are somewhat more stylized. I think it makes them more appealing. In animation, you can do pretty much everything you want, but that's also can be difficult when you have infinite possibilities. But I kind of like having freedom and being able to tell kind of personal stories in very unconventional and bold ways.
I'm generally really impressed with what he was able to pull off with this. And again, this is using free software, and I liken him to Robert Rodriguez. And if you don't know Robert's story, he's got a book called Rebel Without a Crew, and it's about the story of making his first movie, which he basically did for $8,000, and it launched him into great success. Let's take a look at another one here, and this is a little bit more of a behind the scenes deal, and it's a little bit longer, and it's got some really cool stuff in it.
3 years ago, Gintz Zilbalaudis opened a hobbyist 3D software, Blender, on his computer. Today, he's holding an Oscar that shocked the entire animation world. His journey from laptop to Academy Award stage defies everything we thought possible in modern filmmaking. Today, on Movies Unbound, we're revealing each incredible step that transformed Flow from a solo project into the film that's completely changing animation. This is the story of how one person with basic tools proved major studios and million-dollar budgets aren't necessary to create award-winning animation. Ready to discover how a single animator rewrote the rules and created a revolution? Let's explore the making of Flow. From bedroom to Blender, the unlikely origin story. What if I told you the Oscar-winning film Flow started as a 7-minute high school project by a kid who wasn't even satisfied with his drawing skills? Back in 2012, a young Latvian animator named Gints Zilbalotis created a short film called Aqua. It featured a cat navigating a flooded world. Sound familiar? This modest 2D animated project would eventually evolve into the groundbreaking feature that stunned the animation world. But the path from there to Oscar glory wasn't exactly straightforward. Zilbalotis had a problem. He didn't think he was good enough at drawing. Instead of giving up, he made a bold decision that would change everything. He abandoned 2D animation completely and taught himself to use Blender, a free 3D animation software that most people use for hobby projects or learning the basics. It was like deciding to build a rocket ship using parts from your garage.
Now, I want to just chime in on this for a second because I relate to that very, very much because that is very much my own personal journey doing this. I started many years before he did. But one of the things that is really important to look at here is the fact that even if you can't draw, okay, and I talk to my students about this all the time. I don't personally draw, okay, so I have even less skills than this guy does. But one of the things that I found very, very early on was when I got into doing 3D, it kind of helped blur that line a little bit because the things that I was weak in, the computer actually helped me with. Like, I couldn't draw straight lines, but I certainly knew what good movement was like. I certainly understood certain things. And so to be able to make that transition from, just hand drawing things and realizing that's not going to work and to going to Blender, I think it's fascinating. Now, I have become a huge lover of Blender. In the sense that it's on a lot of ways, it's like the printing press. It's opened up these opportunities for people that traditionally, if you were trying to use Maya, Maya's more than $2,000, for a year, and that's expensive. Not everybody's going to be able to do that, but you get into a really functional methodology for using Blender, and the new version is even way better than the previous versions. So there's a lot of great things coming out, but being able to have that as a tool, as a kid, it's a huge step forward for things.
The challenges only multiplied from there. Latvia isn't exactly known as an animation powerhouse. The industry was tiny, resources were scarce, and connections to major studios practically non-existent. Zilbalotis was essentially trying to create a feature film in a creative desert. Undeterred, he spent years teaching himself every aspect of the animation process while working in complete isolation on his first feature film, Away. As he described it, this solitary journey became his film school. He was learning all the techniques and processes he'd need for future projects.
This was his first film. Okay, does it look as good as Flow? Absolutely not, right? And is Flow perfect? Absolutely not. But the thing that I have to really encourage everybody who's listening to this on is keep fighting for your dreams. Like, keep shooting for something, keep working on something, and there is no substitute for doing it. None whatsoever. I mean, I can teach, anybody all day long how to use the software, how all the tools work and all that sort of thing. But in the end, the students that I've personally had that have done the best in this are the ones that are like, okay, I'm going to get up at midnight and I've got an idea and I want to try and work this out. And if you keep pushing yourself and you keep working on something bigger and larger, you're going to have success. He is a great example of that. And now it's an interesting question, so why did this movie win the Oscar and beat out like Inside Out 2? I mean, movies with ridiculously large budgets. And, again, who's to say in art what's the best? I mean, art is so subjective. And so when it comes down to the Academy, oftentimes it comes down to who's got the best story to tell. And we've seen this time and time again, so I mean, this guy has a phenomenal story to tell, and just in terms of what he did and why he chose to do it, and how he got there. And we saw that, and if you check out some of our other stuff, we saw that also in Godzilla minus one. And I'm just going to shift to this really quick because we talked about this one last year, and this was best visual effects, Godzilla minus one. And was it the best visual effects? I don't know necessarily, but they had a phenomenal story to tell about being a really tight Japanese crew that did something really, really special. And so oftentimes what you find is that artists that have a great backstory of how they got to where they get greatly rewarded in Hollywood. So for me, that's one of the things that I saw, and I think is really at play here. Now, so I'm just going to talk a little bit more here.
And a budget under $4 million. The traditional path would have bankrupted them in weeks. So instead, they pioneered a workflow so radical that major studios are now studying it. Think about how big animation studios operate. They start with extensive storyboarding, create detailed concept art, model entire environments down to the tiniest details, and spend months rendering each frame using powerful server farms. It's methodical, expensive, and considered the right way to make animation. With a small team and personal computers instead of render farms, Zilbalatis faced what seemed impossible. Their solution: throw out the animation rulebook entirely. Instead of starting with rigid storyboards that locked them into specific shots, they built rough environments and characters first, then explored these virtual spaces with camera tools, almost like documentary filmmakers discuss.
A radical approach, and I will absolutely say that this is where filmmaking is going. There is no doubt in my mind. With the advent of the way that Blender is working, and specifically also the way that Unreal Engine is working, it becomes so easy to build an environment and then it start to feel a little bit more like you're just being a filmmaker moving a camera around rather than being an animator, and you're restricted to very, very specific shots. This is exactly how Mufasa is supposed to look, and we've approved that look, and it's gone all the way up and down the chain and that sort of thing. Where now we're just building the environments. Hey, let's put the animals in here. Let's kind of let them run and see what happens. And it's obviously a workflow that makes sense. It's obviously a workflow that can be replicated. And it's something, if you're a young aspiring artist, this is something you should be looking at. And I want to really encourage you guys for
discovering shots in real locations. The team only detailed elements that would actually appear on camera. Imagine traditional animators spending weeks perfecting an entire forest when the camera only shows a small section. Zilbalatis eliminated this waste, focusing resources exactly where viewers would see them. Their most revolutionary decision was using Blender's Eevee rendering engine. While traditional rendering can take hours per frame, Eevee allowed them to see results almost instantly. They traded some photorealistic qualities for speed, which pushed them to develop a distinctive visual style that stands apart from ultra-polished studio productions. Even their lighting broke convention. Rather than creating physically accurate light sources for entire environments, they designed lighting specifically for camera angles, enhancing storytelling through carefully crafted visual moments.
Will know that this is a thing. I love problem solving. Okay, I think that if you're going to be good in this industry, some of probably the top 5-6 skills that you're going to need to be successful somehow are related to problem solving. And filmmaking, for me, is nothing but an exercise in solving problems. Okay, why does this not work? How do we shoot this shot? How do we light this more effectively? And then, visual effects and animation are a subset of that as a problem-solving exercise. And so I'm sitting here looking at this going, that's really inventive. Like, that's a smart idea. And you can get away with a lot if you choose a style and say, hey, okay, this is exactly how they're going to look, and it's going to look that way simply because we can't afford the render time. And again, and I've already in this thing talked about how I don't necessarily love the look, but I totally get it. And this is a way that they won an Oscar, and now he's got a massive future ahead of him as a filmmaker. Now, will his next one look like this? Probably not, because computers are going to be faster, and maybe there'll be fur on his characters and actual feathers on things and things that look a little bit more realistic. But that's all things that you can do now, and because he's going to probably have a little bit more of a budget.
This approach, influenced by Zilba Lotus's background in live-action filmmaking, allowed more cinematic compositions without constant edits. What's remarkable is how these limitations enhanced rather than hindered the film's artistic impact. By focusing only on what matters and making intentional choices about resource allocation, the team achieved something major studios often struggle with: pure artistic vision without bloat. Speaking without words, the silent storytelling revolution. Those technical innovations were groundbreaking, but Zilba Lotus's boldest creative decision might surprise you even more: telling an emotionally complex story without a single word of dialogue. In an era where animated films compete for A-list voice talent and memorable catchphrases, Flow took the ultimate risk by abandoning speech entirely. Films compete for A-list voice talent and memorable catchphrases, Flow took the ultimate risk by abandoning speech entirely. Imagine trying to make audiences laugh, cry, and form deep connections with characters that never speak a single word. That's the massive challenge Flow's creators embraced. Modern viewers expect snappy dialogue and clear storytelling, yet Flow asks them to connect with animals that communicate solely through authentic behavior. Rather than giving their characters human expressions and gestures, the team developed a visual language based entirely on genuine animal movements. Their process was meticulous. Animators logged countless hours studying wildlife footage, analyzing nature documentaries, and observing their own pets. They learned to translate real animal behavior into emotional storytelling that speaks directly to viewers' hearts. The results are stunningly effective. When the cat hunts, its pupils dilate exactly as they would in nature. Fear appears through flattened airplane ears instead of human-like expressions. A character's tail position instantly reveals its emotional state. These natural details create a movement vocabulary more powerful than words could ever be. Sound design reinforces this authentic approach. Instead of voice actors creating humanized animal sounds, the team recorded actual animals. For the capybara character, they used baby camel vocalizations since real capybaras make few sounds, adding another layer of immersive realism. Throughout Flow, environmental storytelling carries significant weight. Abandoned houses, ancient ruins, and mysterious statues populate the flooded landscape, revealing the world's history without explanation. I didn't want to have this didactic, simple message that being independent is bad and working together is good, Zilba Lotus explained. The dog character follows a completely opposite journey from the cat, creating nuanced exploration of independence versus community. The flood setting works both as physical obstacle and emotional metaphor. Characters navigate barriers of trust, cooperation, and survival, perfectly mirroring the film's themes of isolation and connection, changing animation forever, the Oscar impact. From metaphorical flood to actual industry earthquake, Flow's journey from festival underdog to Oscar victor shocked everyone except the small team who believed in it from day one. When this modest Latvian production premiered in the Un certain regard section at Cannes, It marked a historic moment as only the second Latvian feature to screen there since 1998. Yet, few industry executives paid attention to what would soon become a cultural phenomenon. The film's true breakthrough came at Annecy Animation Festival, where it dominated with a stunning 4-award sweep: Jury Award, Audience Award, GAN Foundation Award for Distribution, and Best Original Music Award. This clean sweep sent tremors through the animation establishment. Industry veterans couldn't believe a Blender-produced film could challenge Disney and Pixar. The conventional wisdom that award-winning animation required proprietary software, massive budgets, and major studio resources was crumbling before their eyes. What made Flow
But I think one of the things that, as artists, and particularly as young artists, as you're just getting started in your careers, or if you've been working at it for some time, this is what we've always dreamed that it would be. Okay, and I'll just tell you from my own personal experience at the very, very beginning of my career, I started on a program called Lightwave. I had my first, it was an Amiga 2000 was the first machine I ever did anything on. And this was sort of my dream. It's like, oh my gosh, like I can build all these worlds and these environments and stuff like that. Now, it was never really that easy. I mean, because the render time was so unbelievably long. But now we're absolutely at a place 25, 30 years later where you absolutely can go out. If you've got a dream and you've got a laptop and you've got free software, you can start working your vision out. And there's no doubt about that. So as I wrap this up, I think what I want to say here is that if you're a young artist, really, really be looking at what you can do. And you should take a lot of inspiration from this, because it genuinely shows that as artists, there's a lot more opportunities available than there ever used to be. I mean, we used to spend so much time just operating within a studio system, and it was just the studio that was providing money for a film or an animation or whatever. But now you've got so many different ways to distribute your work, so many different ways to get it done. And if you're in my class, you certainly have classmates that you can work with. You've got a kind of a built-in team. So this is our analysis of Flow. And thank you guys, and we will talk next week.